Is the construction industry just high pressure, or is it quietly designed in ways that break people over time? Dan Lester is back on Construction Genius for a second conversation about mental health in construction. He is leading up Clayco's mental health and well-being work, and their latest Combating Stigma findings are quite blunt. 64% of construction workers report anxiety or depression in the last 12 months, up from 54% the year prior. In this conversation, we unpack what owners and executives can actually do about it, not just raise awareness and have conversations, but make real upstream changes in schedule, culture, leadership behaviors, and even the kinds of clients you choose to work with. Let's dive right into the conversation. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Dan, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Second time back on the show. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to our first conversation. You're coming back on because Clayco's been doing some terrific work thinking through and really analyzing and exploring the challenges that folks have in construction with mental health. What's been the biggest surprise to you over the past year or two as you've been involved in this project?
It's a great question. And I think the bigger surprise is that it wasn't a surprise, but it was great to hear how it was good to see that the executive level folks admitted to their level in this conversation. So they admitted to some of the way that they use substances and the way that the coping mechanisms that they use. And there was actually a higher number than the tradespersons. And we know that that's a huge number. We have the highest opioid overdose rate in our industry. So with executives or those that are in leadership and decision-making authority saying, hey, I've got some issues myself. And more importantly, I use substances myself. That gives us a little deeper conversation to have. And I think that's important for us. But I think what's also interesting is the nature of how, even though this conversation about awareness has become pretty prevalent, there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great work out there in this industry, but we're still at the very front door of really getting support, care, and concern where it's needed the most.
Yeah, and we're going to have a link in the show notes to your latest annual report on combating stigma, mental health, and support issues in the construction industry. If anxiety and depression are this widespread in construction, is the real problem awareness, or is it that the job itself is designed in ways that quietly break people?
Man, you're starting off with the hidden hard questions here. I think there are some occupational hazards to being in our industry, right? I think when you look at the study, many people talked about the physically demanding nature of the job, the reality that 42% of the folks talked about the poor work-life balance and tight deadlines and those things being away from family, many of which cannot be changed. So I think you're right. We're dealing with a conversation that I think the industry has to decide how we're going to work. And if we're going to prioritize productivity, prioritize deadlines, prioritize those things over mental health, as opposed to potentially maybe pulling back a little bit and saying, I wonder if we prioritize mental health a little bit more, if our productivity would actually increase, right? Because we know there's a lot of places where we are very unproductive. A lot of hours that go kind of quietly unkept or quietly unclaimed or paid attention to. So I wonder if we really started to focus there. And I think this is an owner level conversation. You really have to start this conversation at the owner's level. Those who are saying, this is the project I want. This is how fast I want it. I wonder if we were able to extend it out a little bit longer. Maybe, hey, instead of finishing now, finish 3 months later. And if that could slow the timelines down a bit and slow the 60-hour work weeks to 50-hour work weeks. And, I wonder if that would be a help. And I think this is a great question that our industry has to come together and really begin to think about how we're going to support it, because we're losing that talent, and the talent that would put up with something like that might be kind of ending its tenure in our industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking here at the report, and You have nearly 2/3 of construction workers say they have experienced anxiety or depression within the last year, that is 2025, and that's up from 54% in 2024. There's a couple of things that strike me about the data that you have there, and these results are evenly spread throughout the country. The first part is that you have the generational differences and similarities. So Gen Z, it's 69% report anxiety, whereas Gen X, it's only 59%. And then it's interesting because millennials and baby boomers are similar to Gen Z, which I find interesting. But why do you think there's that gap between the Gen X folks and the other generations in terms of not experiencing as much anxiety or depression?
I would have to think about the kind of the characteristics of a generation. Generation X typically mirrors a lot of the baby boomer generation, and many of those Gen X people still are waiting for their turn to be in leadership. So they might be less willing to be honest about the nature of the work that they're experiencing, the nature of their responses, because they're also used to the traumatic experiences, right? You Gen X, you grew up in a rough place where, you know, I think after Gen X, the millennials came along and they put safeguards in place that Gen X found needed to be there. Right. You know, I remember growing up and you hear the commercials, it's 11 p.m. or it's 9 p.m. Do you know where your kids are? You know, that kind of thing that today we would never let our kids go too far without us knowing where they are. We got GPS trackers. So anyway, I think the way that people are raised kind of delineates the nature of how they respond in the workplace. So if you're looking at how people approach work, it could be just that the Gen X folks are just not as willing to do it or not as willing to admit it because they're looking for that next place or they're used to that trauma. It's really trauma. If you're looking at a place where you're dealing with the ordinary stresses of life and the pressures of a job and its hard type deadlines, hey, they're from the generation that says, suck it up, get it together. Their parents and their grandparents told them to suck it up, get it together, do what it has to do to get it done, and you'll be rewarded for that. And I think there's still a very big presence of that in our workplace today. And so, but I think what your data then shows you, and I think if you look at boomers are toward the end of their career. So they're starting to be more relevant and aware of, this is not as important to me maybe as it was. And maybe I should be aware and speak up. And millennials and Gen Zs, hey, those folks are going to tell you, maybe there's some things that we won't accept or that they won't accept in the workplace. And maybe I don't have to go through what my parents went through in the work. Matter of fact, maybe my parents worked hard enough so that I wouldn't have to go through the same things that they went through. And so I think you're going to start to see that in our workplace, in our workforce. And I believe we already have, right? We don't really have the numbers of coming into our industry that we'd like, and we have mass numbers exiting every day. And so we've got to find a way to really pull, something together that's going to really make a difference in the way people experience work. And construction is a hard place to deal with the nature of it because some of it we can't really change like we talked about before, but we've got to find ways and to have the conversation differently.
It's interesting. Another aspect of that data on anxiety and depression, it broke it out by gender, and 73% of females reported anxiety or depression as opposed to 60% of males. It's interesting to think about the differences between men and women as it relates to working in construction, particularly because of the difficulties with construction and with more women in the workplace. What effect do you think that has on women in construction specifically? That's what I'm referring to. What effect does that have on these numbers in terms of the percentage of people who are reporting anxiety or depression?
I'm not sure how well that really runs the gamut, and I'll tell you why. Women don't really make up a big demographic in our industry. They're a growing demographic, certainly. But if you're talking about the field, right, overall, I think they're close to 10% of the industry. So, and they are statistically the group that reports having the most level of harassment and kind of on job sites across the country. So if you look at the data that's available, harassment data and people that are reporting data, the women are the ones that typically get it the worst on sites. And so it wouldn't be relevant. And if you're talking about women who are in their maternal years and they have children and families, and I have to come to work and I'm still expected to do some of the other things that are kind of traditionally connected with motherhood and that piece and family and being a part of that role in my family, it may be a little bit more challenging for me. But if you're treating me differently, or if I have it a little bit harder, or if I feel that I have to do more, or do go above and beyond because of the nature of the environments around me. I'm the only one on the job. I'm the only woman that could speak up for myself, or whoever, however that can be. It's not unreasonable to think that they would have higher levels of anxiety. But also, here's something that the data shows, and my counterpart with NAMI, who we're partnered with on this particular study, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, they talked about the fact that sometimes when we start creating awareness, those numbers will go up, right? Because people are feeling that it's okay to actually start to speak up about it and say, you know what? They're actually, it's okay for me to talk about it. And we talk about it every month. And you've got all these different, May Mental Health Month, you got all these stickers and all these initiatives that say, hey, speak up, tell us what's going on. So now let me tell you what's going on. And so maybe women are a little bit more willing to be forthcoming than men are, because it's not necessarily tied to, I think a lot of men get tied to the, what you produce and what you produce and what you do kind of dictates who you are in society. And so there could just be a lot of changes there. And we could dive down that rabbit hole a lot. But I think that's where you really start to kind of level it out and say, hey, women just have a different way of looking at it, but we've got to be mindful that if we've invited women to be there, if we've encouraged more women to join our environments, with any other populations that we're dealing with, we've got to be prepared to serve them. At Clayco, we talk about what does it take to prepare the house. You got people coming in, you got women coming in. We know we got more folks from different backgrounds than traditionally have been in the industry coming in. How do we prepare ourselves to better serve them so that hopefully these are not the outcomes that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the fundamental things to consider is the nature of construction itself, which is very much driven by schedule. And then obviously, if schedule is the driver, then efficiency and production is a massive motivator. And those things tie together towards the profit motive. And that then contrasts or conflicts with this idea of mental well-being, because it frankly is stressful to do something on time and on budget, and at the same time safely, while dealing with all of the difficulties associated with construction. So when you think about these numbers, and the numbers are quite striking. I mean, if you got nearly 2/3 of people saying that they're anxious or depressed, you obviously want to do something about that. What are the fundamental things that we need to change in construction? Let's assume that we're not going to directly go after an individual's mental health just for a moment, but take a systematic and systemic look at it. What are some of the fundamental things that we need to change in order to address these downstream effects of anxiety and depression?
We've got to start looking at the upstream conversations that impact things downstream. So if you're looking at the schedule, like you said, schedule drives everything. So if the schedule allows, we'll plan in certain days for so many rain delays or so many, different kind of things there's different plans that we kind of do. We've got to start thinking better about what that's the biggest asset that we have that we use in our project, which is labor, right? If labor is taxed out, maxed out, stressed out, anxious out, anxiety all over the place, what is that doing to your productivity? What is that doing to, I'm really interested to start to see, what does that do to our rework numbers, right? So what does that do to, it was placed, but was it placed correctly? Or did you just get it done and now you got to come back and do some rework on it anyway? I think we're going to have to have significant conversations about how we start the job, how we onboard people is a big thing. But I think also the day-to-day care and concern that we have for people. When somebody has a issue, when somebody has a life situation, if I raise my hand and I need assistance, how we respond to that, to me, is going to be a big issue. Because if we respond negatively, and I told you I needed help before I heard anyone else or didn't do anything, am I able to get back to work? Am I able to come back and keep my job when I speak up? Because that's the fear, and the data shows some of that, right? So I think we've got to start looking at the schedule. We've got to start looking at, maybe the anti-retaliation for those things. So is there some sort of anti-retaliation? And this doesn't necessarily fall underneath our traditional anti-retaliation, right? But if I tell you I've got mental health challenges, and many of us probably, if we went and got some assistance, might have some level of anxiety or depression anyway. But I think if I'm telling you about it, does that change my trajectory within your mind as the leadership? Does it change my career outlook? And if it does, then I would definitely be anxious about it because, hey, I can't even speak up about the things that are the most important to me. Are we considering the job site protocols and kind of are we speaking to it on a consistent basis and not just speaking to it as in lip service, but are we truly living it out? You know, some companies have started and we've started to do it too. Wellness zones. Are we really looking at places? But if you do have a wellness zone, right, on your job site where you can go and get away and take a moment out of the busy hustle and bustle, if I use that wellness zone, am I going to be looked at differently, as weak? Am I going to be looked at as needy? Am I going to be looked at, oh, they can't handle it? And then that's going to change my pieces. So we've got to start to really, I think we've got to start to do more practicing what some of us are preaching, and it's got to become important to everybody. We're this asset of labor is, I'm not sure we're really seeing how dire the conversation is. It is already a tough, many of these hyperscale projects that are going on right now, we're fighting for what labor. You're pulling people from any and everywhere sometimes to meet the demand and numbers. What does that do to your training? What does that do to your safety numbers? What does that do to your culture? We just got to start spending more time. So there's a few things that have to happen, and it's going to start with our owners and our community. I think the owners and those who buy construction projects have to have realistic concerns, and they have to be a part of this conversation as well, so they can know how they can be solutions to us downstream.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today. It's interesting though, because I'm assuming that the construction company owners who are listening to this are well-intentioned folks who want the best for their workers. And I can imagine that some of them are thinking, Dan, I want to take care of my workers' mental well-being. But one of my concerns is that people would abuse or misuse this idea of the breaks that people should be afforded or the space that people should be afforded to decompress. And it's going to damage my company if I make too much of an emphasis on this. I do want to take care of my workers, but at the end of the day, the company's in business to make money, and I don't want people abusing my kindness, let's say, and as a result of that, damaging my company.
I think that's where culture comes in, right? Many companies now, I'm not sure how many construction companies do, but some constructions do have the unlimited PTO, right? Not typically happen in the field, but just think about the idea. And how can you offer unlimited PTO? Well, the reason is that if you offer unlimited PTO, the reality is that chances are you're not going to use more than probably what was given, right? But it's the idea that if you know it's there, you don't have to be anxious about the fact that if you need to use it. I think on the other side, the culture of a business, the culture of an environment that says, there's an expectation that you pull your weight here, right? There's an expectation that that even if you take a break, you still can come back in. And I think as leaders, we have to model that as well, right? If your leader is modeling unhealthy behavior of how they work and how they balance, it's going to be challenging to encourage other people to take advantage and say, whoa, well, if my leader, or I think if leaders ushered people in, hey, let's take a quick break. Let's take a pause. Let's do something different. Let's eat and go play ping pong for a few minutes and it's 5 minutes. It's 10 minutes. Let's say it's 20 minutes. But at the end of the day, if you're gone for 20 minutes, how much do you miss, right? And you miss a lot. There's a lot of things that you miss. But would I miss more, or would I have done less work? Would my productivity over that 20 minutes do I gain more mentally in that 20 minutes than I do productively in that 20 minutes, right? Is the trade-off equal to say it's better for them to get a little bit of time, or even have the option of a little bit of time? Because if it's there, you still got to deal with the culture of how people use it. And if I get something, oh yeah, of course the nurse is there. But if you go to the nurse, oh, of course you do. I remember being in college playing football. It's in that case, you're definitely supposed to see the athletic trainer. But sometimes, depending on what the nature of your injury is, you don't want to see the athletic trainer because you are afraid to report that you're injured in some way and that you might not be able to play. And in our environment, folks that can't work, or this example that can't play, they don't get a chance to eat. So if you can't work, you don't eat. And we're not like us where we get PTO days and things of that nature. So we've got to find ways to allow people to de-stress something. And I think it's going to be, again, it's going to start with practicing what you preach. The leaders have to model that behavior. And owners have to appraise it. It's just like anything else. You reward it, you measure what you treasure, and then you reward it accordingly. And you highlight that as a positive. Hey, this person took time off. They needed the time off, and we should be able to support them in that. And I think if we're a part of the team, that hopefully should allow people that are a part of the team to say, hey, that's great. When I need it, I have that available to me too.
So I think it's an interesting analogy to draw between football and construction, because football, obviously, if you're going to play football at a high level, you actually have to be willing to tolerate injuries to a great extent. I mean, you see, some guy who's been playing 15 NFL games, and you always hear the interview that there's no one in the room here who's not banged up or injured in some way, and yet they rally to whatever extent they can to play the games. A lot of human growth and achievement comes through pain, suffering, and difficulty. In this conversation about mental health, is there any danger that as a result of the conversation, we actually hinder the ability of people to grow and to thrive as human beings?
Wow, big question. You're right. Here's what I would tell you for those that I know who have played significant years in higher level football. There is a toll that even the likes of a Deion Sanders, who's got a missing foot, right? There is a toll that you will pay at the end of the rainbow for your 10-year career. Let's say the average NFL career, I believe, is 2.5 years.
It's very short.
You get your pension after 5. Okay. So you get kind of locked into pension after 5 years. It tells you get retirement benefits if you make it 5 years. If you step on the field 5 years in a row, you get retirement benefits. Everybody I know that played high levels in the NFL is dealing with anxiety and depression, mental health challenges, banged up bodies, and all those things. And many of them will tell you that the money that they made does not negate the current status of where they are physically, cognitively. And so while the pressure to perform, and I would say in a gladiator capacity, where we're talking about where we're performing for entertainment, right? This is not entertainment. This is real life. And so for real life, and we're not getting paid millions of dollars in these trades. Now, if we treated tradespeople like we treated NFL players, well, gosh darn it, I think that people might be, we'd be having a different conversation. We'll be talking about ways to mitigate your mental issues a little bit better, but we're not. We're talking about folks who still in society have had a significant generation or two of talking about the fact that their careers are less valuable than some of the other careers in our lives. And so while you're sitting in chairs and walking in buildings that these folks' hands and their tools have put together, they're less valuable than the doctor who is able to do something else because of the nature of the school, or you didn't go to college. And so because you didn't go to college, you're not as valuable in the enterprise. And so there is a nature that so going back to your question, I don't think we're going to hinder people, right? I think there is a certain point of pride that many tradespeople have about how they approach their work. They like being in an industry where they can see, hey, I worked 8 hours and I can see what my 8 hours did. And Eric, me and you know, sometimes that we can work 8 hours. You be like, I don't know what I did today. But in a place like that, you can see 8 hours and say, I laid 1,000 bricks today, or whatever the case may be. And so there's a pride and a compassion. And so I think what we've got to tie into the culture again comes into it. What's the environment that I'm coming into? If the environment is a high stakes, high performance environment, doesn't mean that we don't care about your individuality. It don't mean we don't care about your mental health and your well-being. It means that in your performance, we are aware that performing at this level will have some consequences, may have some negative burn off, if you will, if you think about fuel, right? May have some negative exhaust. How we handle that exhaust, what we do with that exhaust, there might be some threshold of how many days you can work in a row that might be valuable. Right. There could be some standards that we put in place that say, no, I still want you to work hard. I still want you to give me your best, but I'm going to be aware of how you give your best and maybe make it so that if you give your best, you don't have to give your all. Okay. Like, I don't want you to give everything to the job because because the job should not require everything that I have. And I know some people might be looking at me crazy or thinking crazy, but I'm thinking about when I say everything, I'm talking about my life, my health, my strength, my family. Although I shouldn't have to give all of that up to come to work at a job like this. Many people, I was watching an interview with Shaquille O'Neal the other day, and he was talking about his son, whose son is kind of being recruited now. He's got a place where he says, son, you remember, you don't have to play basketball. I did this so you don't have to play. How many birthdays did I miss, son? How many this did I miss? And so when you start to think about, and even me on the road a little bit as a parent, I miss things. And there's moments that I missed. I missed my kid's Christmas concert a couple of weeks ago. How many of those and I'll never get that year's Christmas back. I can only watch it video. How much does that change how my kids look at me? How does that change how we engage? And I think it seems anecdotal and trivial, but I think there's so many people who are away from their friends and their family who have just accepted that this is what they have to deal with in order to make the bills connect. And maybe we should hopefully make it a little easier for people to make the bills connect and for you to still have some sort of life that you can be proud of and engage and take advantage of that helps out as well.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. Yeah, I think it's interesting because if we're going to move beyond just the reporting of the statistics, it has to begin with really a discussion at the highest executive levels in construction companies, but then also with the customers. And I think one of the challenges is that if it starts, let's say, with the customer, and they're willing to accept more cost and a slower schedule, and then in combination with the owners of the companies who are willing then to maybe accept less profit, then perhaps that could then trickle down to the way that a construction project is run. But in a relatively free economy, it seems to me that there's always going to be the companies who are going to say, well, I know that this company that is perhaps a little more flexible with their schedule because they want to take care of their workers, I know this company is going to be bidding this project at a certain dollar amount, and I can just underbid them because I know that I'm going to drive my workers more intensely. And as a result of that, the incentives for people to put in place some of these measures that you're talking about kind of go away because it doesn't make economic sense in the short term, though it may make economic sense in the long term. What do you think about that?
It's a good point. And I would say to you, it's the difference between going in and purchasing a Kia and let's say a Mercedes, right? And
Sure.
they're both vehicles. They can both get you to the same place. Kia, I have a Kia Stinger and my Stinger is great, but it's no Audi, okay? But I know that I was getting a Kia. I knew I was buying a Kia. I knew what I was accepting when I bought that Kia. But if I go and buy a Mercedes, I'm expecting things. So that means my fee might be a little higher. I might be a little more expensive. So then what's the best value to my client? Right? If my client, so most of us that are in our industry, we like to work with clients that have the same values as us. Our founder, Bob Clark, is always talking about if we get the best and the brightest and we treat people the way that we want to be treated, then we can be selective about who we apply our craft with our clients. And that means we get the chance to work for clients who value what we value. And that means ideally that I get a chance to be with a client who understands that my culture, I can still be, we have a 0.39 EMR. I can still have a 0.39 EMR and care about my people. I can still have a successful mental health and well-being process and engagement strategy and care about my people. And you won't see the impact in your productivity. We can still finish that job. We can still do that thing. So I think you're right. It really has to force us, because really what we as construction professionals have to start doing is saying, listen, I have a finite amount of resources. And yes, I might make a whole lot of money on this project. But as you and I both know, we still need the next project, right? We still need the next project. Yeah. And without the labor to build the next project, then we're going to be down. And so you want to have, and if you find a team of people that is good, you want to nurture those people. You want to give those people what they need. I had an issue a couple of years ago where I lost my brother to suicide. And because of that issue, my company gave me probably more leeway than they just let me do what I needed to do to handle the scenario, right? And so I was out maybe longer than some people may have been out, but I was able to handle what I needed to handle and come back. That was an extraordinary stress of life. But now I can articulate to anybody else in my enterprise that when you have one of these extraordinary circumstances, when you have something that is dire happen to you and you need your team to wrap up around you and kind of close and cover you, we have the ability to do that. And I think, and there are companies out there that are doing this. There are people that are getting trained, but it just has to come down to the core of who we are. We cannot allow our people to continue to operate like this. If people are so depressed, so anxious, depression is you're worried about the past, concerned about what happened, anxiety is about the future. If you are so worried about the future of things that are happening and so worried about, and what then role does the job site play in that anxiety and depression? Hopefully, not all the things that are depressing and anxious for us may not be job related.
Yeah, it's true.
But we can certainly contribute. And I think you're right. We have to have some difficult conversations. But I think those that are doing the right things, we're finding certain of our mega clients, these hyperscale projects, they have to be in tune with the community. The community is not going to let you come in and spend $2-3 billion of money in the community and not do something for their people. And so I think we should be in the same capacity to where we say we want to be good neighbors. We also have to be good employers. And if I've got, right now, Clayco has roughly 40,000 plus people working on job sites across the country. If I want to be a preferred vendor, because I'm going to be competing for labor with all of my peers. And if I want to be a preferred vendor, the people say, no, I'm going to give you my best talent. Why? Because I know that when I send my talent to your job, they have a different experience. It's the culture. So it's
interesting.
How
let
you
me
made
just
me
interrupt
feel.
you there. Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's interesting because you draw an interesting picture there that I want to make a note of, is that you talked about the founder of your company and how he has certain cultural standards, which he then applies in the types of customers that he goes after. I heard you right there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you tied that into the vendors, suppliers, subcontractors. So it is possible for a company to be successful with an approach that emphasizes the well-being of their workers, in addition, obviously, to the profitability of the business. And that pursuit of well-being and profit can be achieved if you have the right clients, the right vendors, the right suppliers, the right subs, and the right culture in your own business. Am I hearing that correctly?
That is correct. That is what we call Clayco rising.
Yeah, so it's really a choice. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think
we
one
rise
thing that
together.
people
So
really
go ahead.
struggle with, one thing that people really struggle with is it's having the difficult conversation not because you don't care, but when you see someone who is struggling, maybe you don't know what to say. You don't know how to go about the conversation. You're maybe concerned that HR will become an issue, or you don't want to pry into their private lives. Or you may even think, this is not even my job. My job is to build this building. It's not to counsel this person as to their mental health. How can companies equip their leaders to not only recognize when someone's struggling, but actually to assist them when they're struggling?
Many companies, including ours, have started to invest in the training of our leaders and many of our people on sites to do some sort of suicide awareness training or mental health prevention, where you kind of know the signs, know the symptoms, but it's really any significant and sudden change in behavior. And then you have to teach people that it's okay, right? It's never easy because these folks have difficult conversations every day. If you've got a worker who's being unproductive, that's going to be a difficult conversation. If you have to tell an owner that you have found a issue or something that's going to now be a $30,000 change order, we have to have the difficult conversation right away, which means our people are used to having difficult conversations. They're used to solving difficult problems. They may be less relevantly, they may not have tied that skill set to the mental health and well-being. So now we've got to give them the tools, give them the training necessary to say, look, and you have to practice, right? We had every Friday we do a micro training in our ops meeting. And so the micro training today was about, practice makes permanent, right? So you have to practice the conversations. You get better at having difficult conversations when you say, hey, and if it's somebody you care about, listen, and it's hard when it's somebody that's really close to you or you work with every day. But I have had people come up to me, Dan, is everything okay? You seem like your temperament was a little off in that meeting. And they pull me to a side and say, hey, Dan, is everything okay? Yeah, you're right. I was a little bit off this morning. I appreciate you, recognizing that and blah, blah, blah. Or some people sometimes are willing they want people to notice, right? If you just noticed me, I wonder if I came in here and somebody would notice how terrible of a day I was having or whatever. Some people that wear their heart on their sleeves, and many of us in our industry do sometimes. You start to look at those pieces and you say, you know what, there's something going wrong here. If we practice how to respond, just like we practice and teach our managers how to have difficult conversations, we teach how to have, courageous conversations. We teach people how to be a leader. This is leadership, collaborative leadership, working together. And when you work with people, you got to be able to speak up for your people. The best leaders are ones that speak up for the well-being of their people, that don't let, other things that we can control impact our people. And then also I go and advocate. So are you going to advocate for me or for my people to get better circumstances, better environments? And that's where the culture comes in. It's just got to be something that you're teaching, that you're reinforcing, that you're measuring. You can measure how many conversations you're having, but some of these conversations are so quick, they're short. Now, what I can tell you about this is that having some of these meetings that we've done have given people the opportunity to speak up. One of the meetings that we had recently in September was an awareness meeting just talking about suicide in the industry. It's during Suicide Prevention Month. And we found out later that because of that, in that space, somebody called the number right after that meeting.
Right.
And we were able to save their life. So just because we spent 10, 20 minutes talking about this, it was able to help somebody. And so just like if it helps one person, to me, it's valuable. But you're right. We have to make it sustainable, repeatable. And that's where your culture comes in. And if you have a culture, years ago, the AGC put out the culture of care. If you have a culture where you care about people, and if you really start to care, and it can't be just lip service, right? It's when I need you in those dark times, in those difficult moments, in the moment where I need to go and get my kid because I don't have a sitter. They're sick and the school says I have to come pick them up and I am the only person that can. Can I leave and come back tomorrow and you all don't look at me funny, right? Is that going to, and the only way that happens, Eric, is through experience. People have to see that behavior modeled. They have to not only know that the resources are available, we offer our EAP to any and everybody on our job sites, right? So if you're a subcontractor of ours, you have the same access to that service that I do, and your dependents do as well. But that's just that's a Band-Aid for some things, but it helps people a lot of times get over some of those humps. So, you know, if you're starting to culturally kind of implement that and having people on site that are trained, people that are your go-to trained people, hey, I know if you having issues with this, you can go to any of our superintendents. They've all been trained. You can any of our, you know, project team or however companies would do it. You've got to have that, and it's got to be lived out. It's got to be modeled.
So then I think the one takeaway that I've got from the conversation is, number one, it's a cultural decision that has to be taken at the top of the company. And then it's a strategic decision in terms of which clients you'll choose to work with and which contractors you'll sub out to, or which suppliers or vendors you'll work with. And if you can make conscious decisions in all of those areas, then the argument is that will then have a positive effect on the way you run your jobs. And as a result of that, a positive effect on the experience that people have who work for you and work with you on the job site. And as a result of that, have an impact on some of this mental health challenge that we experience in the industry.
That is true. It is a rising tide, right? Rising tide raises all boats. So as our owners and as our clients are on board, number one, they help fund some of these initiatives at a higher level, but also if there's a value to them, right? Something that's a value to them, that means they're going to help pay for and be a part of supporting it. The community that we serve, right? Where we live and work, right? If you know the community, then you can know the right resources, the right local people that are the right folks to get the help what they need. So one of the most challenging things that we have to do is to kind of be able to live this out, right? To live out the actual cultural piece of it. So being a good neighbor. So when the neighbors know that you're good, they'll give you the right tools. They'll give you to the right folks. Your subcontracting partners who are your local, sometimes they're local, sometimes they might be traveling with you depending on the nature of the work. But if they're engaging with the community, our mantra is beyond these walls at Clayco. So if they're engaging with the community at a higher level, at a longer level, that gives us a greater opportunity to support, to be a part, and to do it together. So when you add all of those pieces together in community, you get a dynamic result.
Excellent. So give us a little more insights into where people can get more information on the work that you're doing, Dan, and how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to.
Sure. You can connect with us through the Clayco website, claycorp.com, Combating Stigma. Look up Combating Stigma, Clayco, and you'll find our study. It has a very in-depth kind of dive and talks about how the study was captured and then how you can, in some of the findings of the study. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You connect with me through Lester DA at claycorp.com, CLAYCORP as in Paul.com. And that will, and we can connect you with some of our team. I help run our Clayco Cares mental health and well-being group that supports all of our businesses, supports our kind of our initiatives across internal and external pieces of the business. And so it is a great opportunity. And I would just say to anybody and everybody, we talk about psychological safety, which is the culture of rewarded vulnerability, but we have to be mindful that when people speak up, we've got to do something about it. Just like when you ask a question or you do a feedback survey, you got to respond to it same way. When we put these initiatives out there, we have to be responsive to how people and how we engage with folks. And if we do that together, we can really start to impact these numbers positively. And I think some of the study shows that, because there are some pieces of the study where things, although other numbers are higher, those that are getting support for those issues are also higher as well. And so there is positives and there's hope in the process.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming back on the show. Links will be in the show notes for everyone who'd like to get more information. And thank you for the work that you're doing here.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to my episode today with Dan Lester. Check out the previous one, episode 333, and take the deep dive into all things mental health and well-being in construction. Please give the show a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts, and we're going to catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.